Hey, everybody, and welcome to The Savvy Entrepreneur, the podcast that is for entrepreneurs and by entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Michelle Burkhart with thesavvymind.com. And today we're talking with Brad Fetterman from Performance Point LLC. Exciting company. They are a management and HR consulting firm. I am really excited. I think they're doing some really great stuff. So let's welcome Brad to the show.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Brad, we were talking offline, and I always joke because I think sometimes we have some of the best discussions offline before we get started. One of these days, I'm going to record that.
That's probably a
But
good idea. I think that's a good
yeah,
idea.
I know. So we were talking, and I want to kind of address this because I love the article. You had mentioned the article
Mhm.
that you had written, but tell everybody about that article, and then after that, I want to tell it kind of like let's tie it into what you guys actually do. But
Sure,
let's
sure.
talk about that article for a minute because I think that was really impactful.
Well, it's called Leveling the Playing Field. It's an article I just wrote and it's being published. And it's really about the fact that in many companies, you saw a rise in leadership. You saw better leadership now than you did prior to the pandemic. And there's a reason for that. The reason for that has a lot to do with the fact that prior to the pandemic, most executives and leaders were far removed from their employees' lives, right? So you
Hmm.
see special cafeterias or dining rooms for certain executives and leaders. You see administrative buildings away from the plants. You see all kinds of things that separate managers, executives from employees.
Right.
And on top of that, you have managers and executives that can afford to do different things, put their kids in private school, have help at the house, a variety of things like that. Then all of a sudden, here comes COVID. And when COVID hits, everything shuts down. I can't go in the office. People won't come to my house and do work, right?
Right.
My kids are no longer in school. And you're all of a sudden dealing with a lot of the same challenges and concerns and issues that your employees are dealing with. And
Hmm.
so all of a sudden, I have more empathy, more emotional intelligence around my employees' lives. And it makes me a better leader, right? That's kind of what's happened in our society. And in that process, you've seen in many cases a rise in leadership. For certain companies, they haven't seen that. And so you've seen the gap between well-run companies and poorly run companies
Oh, that's
increase.
a good point. That is
So,
a really good point.
but here's the question. When COVID passes, when we get past the pandemic and life starts to get to a new normal, I won't go back to normal, but a new normal,
Right. Right.
and people start to build their lives back the way they had them before, or even similar to the way they had them before, the playing field will become unlevel again. So the question
Oh.
becomes, what will leaders do to remain connected to their employees so they maintain that empathy and they have better emotional intelligence? Because those are two key skills that really revolve around leadership, especially today, that we need to maintain, if not increase.
Because that's what your firm does, actually, correct? Why don't you give everybody a snapshot of what you guys do? Because I just was so excited about that article because I thought it was just so spot on for what's going on in the world today.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Our firm is an HR and management consulting firm, and we do a variety of things. Our mission, which is a personal mission for me, I take it very, very seriously, and I live by it, is actually behind me on the wall. You can't see the whole thing on the screen, but it's inspiring others to discover and live their possible. That's what we do each and every day. And when we talk about others, we mean individuals and organizations. Every individual or a community of individuals needs to be able to discover and live their possible, right? We need to see what the possibilities are and really go after them. Otherwise, we're holding ourselves back. And that's
Absolutely.
largely what we do. We do that in a couple of different areas. So our focus really is about engaging employees and customers, creating employee experience and creating a customer experience that strengthen um, the organization overall and the relationships that the organization has. So that's the first area. The second area really revolves around building and maintaining resilient relationships.
Oh,
That
I like that.
well, and it's important because it's really about not making it through the good times. It's making it through the challenging times, right?
Right.
Every relationship, internal, external, employee, employer, manager, employee, has moments where they're tested and they are challenged. And it's those moments that show you how resilient that relationship really is, right? So that's our focus. And then the last one is collaborative cultures, helping to strengthen and build agile, collaborative cultures that can change with the changing economy.
I like it.
Yeah.
And if you're just joining us, you are listening to The Savvy Entrepreneur, which is the podcast that's for entrepreneurs and by entrepreneurs. I'm Michelle Burkhart, your host, and today we're talking with Brad Fetterman from Performance Point LLC. Where are you located, Brad?
We are in Memphis, Tennessee,
In Memphis,
um,
Tennessee.
but we have people in different parts of the country that basically telecommute, to
Oh,
remote.
absolutely.
And we were doing that before the pandemic. So
See, you guys were just forward thinkers already. One of the things that I'd like to talk about, because, I always like to address issues that I think impact entrepreneurs, and everybody's at a different level. There's
sure.
emerging entrepreneurs, there's people that are successful, there's 6, 7, 8-figure entrepreneurs. But what I'd like to do is I'd like you to talk a minute, if you would, about the difference between being a boss and being a leader.
Wow.
Can you do that in a
Yeah,
quick minute?
sure. We have being a boss or a manager is all about, it's about making sure things are being done a certain way. It's about managing stuff, right? And
Right.
you manage process, you lead people, right? And I think because you're a boss, you have more authority. You have decision-making abilities that other people won't have. You have a larger or broader view of the organization. But being a boss doesn't mean that you can lead, right? And I think that's the biggest problem and
Right,
misnomer.
exactly.
You
And
know,
that's why I wanted to talk about that today.
yeah. So one of the things that leaders realize is they can't control people. In fact, they can control very little. That as the organization gets bigger and broader, that they lose control and you gain influence. Influence is your
Mhm.
leverage, right? So
Right.
when you're an individual contributor, you can control your work, and that feels very comfortable. And then when you become a leader, you can influence other people's work, but you can't control their work. And
Mhm.
that is discomforting. The other thing that happens is that as you become a leader, you need to be prepared for unpredictable circumstances in communication. If I go in and work at a bank, for instance, and I'm a teller, I know what 99% of my interactions are going to be like. People are
Mhm.
going to walk up and say, "How are you doing?" They're great. Can I make a deposit? Right? It's very simple. When you're managing a bank and you're a leader in a bank, you've got customers coming to you with things that you may not expect. You've got corporate coming at you with things that you may not expect. Your boss, your employees. Well, anything's game, right? So your communication level and your thinking on your feet level have to just skyrocket in terms of skill.
Sure. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Um, and then um, and then you realize very quickly that your pay and your success are tied to the success of others in the broader entity, right? And so one of the things that you have people who aren't prepared to lead, who are individual contributors, who get promoted to be a manager, tend to react to the stress level of the new communications skills needed, the unpredictability of their nature, the ambiguity of their job, the lack of control, and then all of a sudden part of my compensation is tied to corporate doing well or to my team doing well. That creates stress. And what that
I
does,
can't imagine for
yeah.
that. For
Oh,
somebody who's not comfortable in that environment, that's got to be. And I think it's interesting to know that, though, if you are the business owner and you promote someone who doesn't understand that,
yes.
there's a major disconnect.
Oh, it's like I've seen salespeople taken to become sales managers and destroy the revenue because they become a bottleneck.
Oh,
They micromanage everybody because if you want to feel like you're in control and you need to feel like you're in control, then you clamp down and you become a bottleneck and you micromanage. And that's typically what happens when you put an individual contributor in a leadership role. what leaders do is instead of micromanaging and being a bottleneck, they grow, they develop, they coach their people, they encourage their people to think critically, they encourage their people to take on responsibility and they delegate, and they do it in a way where that person becomes stronger and better, and so does the company. That's the difference between leading and managing. People want to follow you as a leader.
Sure.
As a
Because
manager,
they're excited because
oh,
you're
absolutely.
you're you're creating the vision for the future too.
And as a manager, you're pushing them
Hmm.
instead of bringing them in, right?
Sure,
And that's a big difference right there. That's
sure,
the difference.
sure.
Unfortunately, a lot of entrepreneurs fall into that trap themselves. They
Well,
don't get a great
because they're
idea and
they're
they're not
just they're
prepared.
technicians.
Yeah,
They start out as tech, and they have to. They start out as technicians, and so that as they grow, that's one of the nice things I think about, because I'm a coach and I work with them, really looking. I kind of look at their business from the and themselves too, from the inside out and the outside in,
right.
and it's really interesting because you've got to have the right mindset. And if you don't have that, but it's exciting if you don't have the right mindset, you actually can learn to have the right mindset.
Absolutely, you
And I
can.
think that's what people don't realize, that's not, it's not the end all be all. It's not the end of the road. You can
Right.
change that thought process,
Sure.
which is exciting. So if you're just joining us today, you are listening to The Savvy Entrepreneur, which is the podcast that's for entrepreneurs and by entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Michelle Burkhart with thesavvymind.com. And today the pleasure is ours to talk with Brad Fetterman from Performance Point LLC in Memphis, Tennessee. And I want to talk a little bit about, we talk about engagement, and I love engagement. I think employee engagement is a fascinating study. I think that when your employees are engaged, I think you get, I love the team spirit that it fosters. But I have also worked in an environment where they touted, like I'll say work-life balance, for
Sure.
example, because that's a big one. They touted work-life balance, but they were also a CPA firm. And so during tax time, there is no such thing.
Sure.
And so, I mean, and I think everybody realizes it, but when can you talk a little bit about that? Because you are involved with employee engagement. So when that doesn't balance, A, what causes that, and B, how do you fix it?
Sure. Sure. Well, I think a couple of things. One is, as an organization, in order to try and gain engagement, you can't make promises that you cannot make, right? That,
Good
if
point.
you can't fix something, don't say you're going to address it, right? And so if work-life balance is key, then you have to acknowledge that we want to make sure that you have work-life balance over a year's period, like in a CPA firm, that there are maybe moments where you're going to lose it, but we'll
Sure.
make up for it in other parts of the year, right? And I think that's the challenge. Is too many people, they look at engagement in what I would call terms where they either check things off the box
Hmm.
or they tackle things that they really shouldn't or can't tackle. So to me, what you're really trying to do is you're trying to create an environment where people want to stay longer. And
Right.
in today's world, that's a challenge because turnover happens a great deal. And the second thing is, you want people to not only be productive and give their all while they're there, right? But you want them to be working on the right things at the right time. And so
Hmm.
we want to measure things that are going to make a difference in those facets. They build a connection between the employee and the employer that drive productivity and drive an intent to want to stay. And
Yeah.
I think that's the key. Now, listen, you have a CPA firm and you're going to have challenges during tax
Oh,
season.
sure.
So
Absolutely.
I think part of that is being honest with your employees about what that challenge looks like. It's about it's about managing a flexibility throughout the rest of the year that you can have when you're not going through tax season.
Hmm.
I also think that during tax season, you can do different things to mitigate those circumstances. So am I focusing on my employees during that time? Am I providing them snacks or food because they're staying till all hours of the night?
Right.
Are we creating a work environment that while we stay focused and we're working on quality, we create fun, right? The stress can either be unbearable and make you want to quit, or the stress can be fun. So I mean, I can tell you, we had to pull a couple of really, really crazy late nights here in the office because of a client situation, but we laughed the entire time and we did great work and we made it a fun experience. And so I think you can do things like that even during stressful times. How people respond to the craziness makes as much of a difference
That's
as
true.
trying to remove the craziness. So
That is true. That is so true. So, and you touched on, and I don't know that people realize this, and I don't know if there's a generic number that you can put to it, but as far as what does it cost a company? What does turnover cost a company? Do you know offhand?
well, there's a lot of different estimates, but if you look at all the costs that go along with it, a lot of times it's about 1.5 to 2 times a person's salary, generally speaking.
So that can be a big deal. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
big deal. And the smaller the company, the
Yes.
bigger of a deal that can be.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the things that companies, they make a real strong mistake, which is this: they want to put somebody in a slot because they want it filled. And what they
Oh.
do is they create a revolving door.
Hmm.
And so you're not only spending hard cash on advertising the position and all those other things that come with it, background checks, whatever you're doing, but you're also taking away other people's time to continually fill it.
Right.
You're taking away time to train the person, and you're creating challenges for you with customers who begin to then say, gosh, my account rep has turned over 5 times in the last year. I don't have confidence in your company
I
anymore. You're
know.
putting
I
client risk,
know.
clients at risk, the relationships at risk. It's very problematic, and we don't think about it when we're doing it. We get caught up in the moment and we go, I need somebody. And no, you need someone good in that role who's going to last long enough that it's
And
going to
someone that can grow.
absolutely, absolutely, yes.
I mean, you want to hire with a 3 to 5 year plan for that person, because you want them to be able to grow with your company and add to
Yeah.
your company. I mean, that would be if if it's a perfect world.
It's the reason why when I have people start here, one of the first things I do with them is I talk to them about why I hired them, what they need to work on, to be ultimately successful in terms of what we hired them for, and where they want to go in the next year to 3 years, right? And
Right.
so I begin that career development conversation on day one because
Right.
I want them to know I'm invested in you. One of the key differentiators between companies that are doing well at keeping their people and companies that aren't right now is this: people realize they have a 50-year career window. You graduate today at 22,
Right.
21, and you're going to be working into your 70s, right? It's 50 years I have to bring income in. And they have seen uncles, aunts, friends, relatives at 48 lose their jobs, have a stale skill set, and not be able to recreate what they had. And their lives have been altered in a negative trajectory because of it.
Right.
And so
Hmm.
they're sitting around going, people in the workforce now are going, I will stay here if I'm more marketable today than I was a year ago. If my skill set is stronger today than it was a year ago. And if you're not going to do that for me, I'm going to go somewhere where they will, because I'm not going to be 48 and on the street looking for a job and not being able to get one because people tell me I don't have what it takes.
Right.
That is a new hot commodity. Am I growing my people? They care about it a great deal.
Do you find that since COVID, and I know that it impacted people, employees in a really negative way, and a lot of people lost their jobs and were
Sure.
downsized and all that stuff. But do you find that as a result of COVID, that people are much more apt to leave their job and go other places?
It's interesting. I'm finding it shifting both directions. There is a
Really?
group of people who are willing to get up and leave. And I think it's because they have had so much happen in their lives and so much altered and changed. One more change just doesn't matter to them, right? And they're willing
Right.
to take the risk. And then you've got other people that want security and they're going to stay. and they're looking for a sense of belonging, right? They want
Well,
to
that's
connect with
true.
something, right? And so what I would say is it really has kind of veered, and there's kind of been a kind of a gap in that regard because people have
Hmm.
gone in two different directions. But that's temporary. It is something that as the economy recovers, and we're seeing reports that the economy is moving towards a recovery, and we get vaccines in place, and we have more of this pandemic under some level of control,
Hmm.
then people are going to start thinking about things from a very different perspective, right? And so if you've got more job openings, then you're going to have more people who are going to be willing to even leave. It won't be as a dichotomous kind of an approach. You'll have more people willing to leave, and you're going to have more people who are going to be challenging their employers to do more for them and give them more,
Right.
because they're going to be less understanding. They're going to go, I got it. Pandemic hit. We weren't sure about the revenue. We weren't sure about this. You had us working from home. It was crazy. But look, I see the numbers. I see where
Right.
things are going. And
Hmm.
it's time for you to start taking care of me again, right? And that's what's going to happen. And
Hmm.
so companies are going to have to be ready for that, or they're going to lose their people.
Right, right. And if you're just joining us today, you're listening to The Savvy Entrepreneur, the podcast that's for entrepreneurs and by entrepreneurs. And I'm your host, Michelle Burkhart with thesavvymind.com. And we're here today with Brad Fetterman from Performance Point LLC from Memphis, Tennessee. And one of the things I wanted to talk with you about, Brad, is I know you guys do a lot of different things. And I always like to ask, what's the favorite thing that your company does? What's
Um,
like the thing that just lights your fire, really like at the core?
it's hard to say there's one thing because I will say this. I can give some parameters to it. One is One is I like this stuff where companies and employees or managers, leaders grow. They're moving towards something, as opposed to dealing with compliance issues. We will
Mm,
get called with companies that are going to say, "I don't want to get in trouble for this. What can I do?" And you're patching. You're doing work that's just it's necessary, but it's not kind of
it's not real sexy.
it's not sexy. No, not at all. That's one. And then two, I like to work with companies that want to make a difference, right? So if I
Mhm.
work with a company and they say, I love doing leadership training, but if somebody says, can you do a class for us? Yeah, it's fun. But if I go to a company and they say, we want to change the culture, and the way we're going to change that culture is through our leadership. Can you help us put together a cultural shift for our company? To me, that's really exciting. When I got a call from a very large hotelier before the pandemic occurred, and one of the things they were talking about was customer loyalty, and one of the key areas they were losing customer loyalty in was problem resolution. That when a problem
Oh,
occurred, they weren't handling it in a way that the customer, the guest, felt
mhm.
great about. And if they didn't rebound well, right, then they lost customer loyalty, and they in many cases lost those customers to other hotel chains.
Sure.
And so they wanted our help in rethinking how they dealt with customer problems. So we actually did research for them and looked at what would make the difference in terms of rebounding when you had customer problems. We came up with um, the right ingredients to make it work. We actually helped them install a new process and a new set of expectations for people working with customers, with guests. And within a month, we saw a 17% increase
Wow.
in customer problem resolution. I mean, it was dramatic, and it impacted their customer loyalty. And so to me, that was cool. I worked with a financial advisor firm actually during a very bad economic period, and they had lost about 50% of their what they were managing, the value
Wow.
that they're managing. And we had to help them think about how they could gain market share during a difficult down market, because that was the only way they were going to recoup and grow. And we were able to get them things like 150% increase in referrals, I think it was a 60 or 50% increase or 60% increase in new money being brought in to be managed, a 350% increase in new customer contacts. And it was because we worked with them on some real strong cultural and behavioral change kinds of issues around the way they worked with customers, with their clients. And so to me, I get jazzed when we can do something that has real value, that's going to make
Hmm.
a difference in people's lives and in their business.
Hmm.
That's
And
what
I
gets
think, you know what I think is
excited.
interesting about what you do when you work with the, because it sounds like you work with larger companies primarily.
Primarily, we do work with smaller companies as well, but we do work with larger companies, and they're both fun. But to me, the
Well,
big
you know,
difference
but
is
what's
the
interesting though,
commitment.
when you get these large companies, Brad, you know, you have them, you have their management team, and so you have the same people having the same thoughts about
Mhm.
the same problems. And so I think that's one of the real advantages to bringing in a firm like yours is that, you know, you're looking at it through a totally different lens,
Right.
and that makes all the difference in the world. And I think that if for any level, for honestly, for any level entrepreneur at wherever they are and their on their growth, I think I think everybody needs to either have a coach, a mentor, an outside consultant, a mastermind group,
Absolutely.
somebody to
I
help
agree.
them look at their business, because you can't, nobody can answer every single question or solve every single problem. You just don't have the capacity to do that. You
Well,
know,
it improves your thought process.
it does. It does.
You have a person who has no skin in the game, and so they're going to look at it more objectively. They don't have the fear that you have. They don't have
Mm.
the pride that you have. They
Well,
don't,
that's just it
right? All those
too.
things. And then I think, they're not stuck in the muck and the mire, and all those things make a difference. And they have a way of helping you process and think through things differently. So, I think you're 100% correct. You make better decisions when you have a different perspective in,
Mhm.
helping you think through things. And I think you're absolutely right. Mastermind coach, a consulting firm, whatever. I'm working with a small company right now, and we're working through, two key things. One is what's going to make their organization function more effectively and efficiently, and we're using an engagement strategy for that. And then the second thing we found out is that they realize that they've got different opinions about their customers, right? So there's a
Oh,
small management team of
yeah.
about 4 or 5 people, and they all see the customers differently, right? And yet, when we ask them in a confidential manner whether they use direct customer feedback to improve their business, the answer was no, right? So we're now looking at putting together an NPS, a Net Promoter Score kind of strategy with their customers that will dramatically change the way they do their business. We just did it with another company, and they were amazed. We were able to help them figure out not only what they did well and what they didn't well, but what their customers cared about and what was the one thing that if they fixed would have the most dramatic impact on their business, their customer loyalty, the whole bit. And they would never have found that out if it weren't for the
Well,
approach.
and it might have been something that they would have never ever thought that would be the one key point.
Yes, if they didn't, they wouldn't have. They hadn't, they wouldn't have, and they were amazed at how well we were able to decipher the information and show it to them and explain why. And what's great about it is they are dramatically improving their business, gaining more customers, and strengthening the relationships they have. I mean, the impact it's going to have on their revenue alone is going to be huge, let alone,
Right.
the way it cascades throughout the organization.
Right. Right.
Right.
Right.
And it's gotten everybody centered around one key thing. They're
Right.
working together. That's powerful.
Right. So now, how you've been in business for quite a while. How long have you been in business?
Oh, you're going to ask me that question. I believe we originally opened our doors in 2003,
Okay.
but we have changed names because we merged with a company a while back and became a different name. And then in August of 2019, we actually split. I
Oh, wow.
took the company completely back. It was a good timing. The partner I had, who was working a different portion of the business, wanted to retire. I did not really do what he did and did not want that portion of the business. We had somebody that wanted to buy that portion of the business, so we rebranded and took just our piece back. and rebranded as Performance Point again. So, yeah.
I think it's really exciting. Well, and the reason I asked that, but I want to make this comment to you first. Congratulations on your flexibility,
You got to be agile.
because I tell you what, the flexible person is the person that wins. So congratulations on that.
Thank
And
you.
the other thing I wanted to ask you is, if you were talking with an entrepreneur who has not seen the level of success that you have, what would what would be the one key thing that you would recommend that they do or focus on?
Wow. I think the biggest thing that they can focus on, I'll give you probably two things. One is emotional intelligence,
Mm,
the ability to read your emotions, the emotions of others, and then effectively blend that with other types of data to make optimal decisions. The truth is that I know a lot of people, entrepreneurs especially, who do one of two things. They either say, I'm going to check my emotions at the door, which is
right. I don't know how they ever do
unrealistic.
that.
No,
Come
it's
on.
unrealistic. And even if you could, the question I'd ask you is why?
Yeah,
Emotions are data. They're
true.
important. They're telling you something, right? So you need to pay attention to them. Or you have the other extreme, which is those people that live and die by their emotions, right? They walk in, if things are good, they're on a high, right? And they walk in, things are bad. It's like, how do I avoid Bob today, right? And so your people are not paying attention to your customers.
Right.
They're paying attention to whether they can talk to you or not, right? So the reality is, you want to have strong emotional intelligence. And in fact, there was some really good research done on this. Leaders, especially of small firms, entrepreneurial companies, where they had one leader or just a couple of key leaders, organizations that had leaders that had strong emotional intelligence, especially what I would call self-regulation skills. Their highs were not too high, their lows were not too low. They
Yeah.
had that little police officer in the back of the head that basically would say, don't say that. I know you want to be sarcastic. Don't be sarcastic right now.
Yeah.
Those types of people who had great emotional intelligence, their companies had stronger and more consistent revenue growth and
Hmm.
and profit and performance,
Interesting.
right? So that to me, I think, is huge. If you haven't focused on that, that's the first thing. The second thing I'm going to tell you is the world is changing exponentially faster today than it ever did, and that's only going to continue. And
Right.
and the impact of those changes on business will become even more paramount. We're dealing with COVID. What people don't know is that a lot of the scientists and futurists that actually try and predict the future have said that we may actually have one or two more pandemics between now and 2030.
Wow.
Okay. They will tell you
That's
that
almost scary. That
it
is
is
scary.
they'll talk to you about rogue nations and individuals and the impact that they may have on society through terrorism, through uh, terrorism through computers and
Oh,
hacking.
yeah.
We have to be prepared for so many things, right? So to me, I think the sense of becoming agile and being able to pivot by quickly making sense of things. There's something called sense making. It's a skill, which is really the ability to create maps, conceptual maps of complex environments while you're in it, right? And
Hmm.
as they change, right? So can I look at the landscape of what's going on out there and what I see and what's happening with my company, make sense of it really quickly, test some things out really quickly and pivot, I think is key. One of the best examples I can give of that years ago was Bill Gates when he did a press conference and he stood up and he said, I foresee a day when I see PCs, when I see personal computers on every desktop. And in that moment, he changed the world and the
Right.
cottage industry was born. And he did that when things were slower. You
Hmm.
have to do that today on a daily and monthly basis.
Right. What is that called? Because that's one of the things that's like my superpower.
It's called sense making, and it's a
I'm
skill
gonna
that a
write
lot
that
of people
down.
don't have. Yeah, it's wonderful. You actually can do some research on it. It's
I'm
it's a
going to.
wonderful skill that's out there, and it's been written up. It is about making sense of the complexity around you in a way that allows you to have a decisive vision, a decisive plan.
Because that's what I do with my clients. I didn't realize there was a name for it.
There you go. There you go. That's the name
uh,
for it.
I just kept saying, I can just see through all the minutia and figure stuff out. but I didn't say it that eloquently. I,
There you go.
cut to the chase more. Well, that's really exciting.
You're a sense maker,
I'm
Michelle.
what can I say? Who knew, right? So, I know we need to wrap up. Do you want to tell everybody where they can find you?
Sure. You can find us at performancepointllc.com. You can find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We're right there. We're on those. You can reach out to us at 901 291. I'm feeling generous today. I usually give the main number, but I'm going to give you my number. 901-291-1547. I'll give you my number, 1547. You can give me a call as well. I will, if I'm not the one to help you because I can't work with everybody, I will pass you along to somebody who can help you, and I'll answer your questions as well. So,
Well, I appreciate your time. I really enjoyed talking with you, Brad. Thank you so
thank you.
much for spending this time with us. And I feel like anybody that's watching is really going to enjoy it as well. So, any parting words real quick you want to say to anybody who might be listening?
The only thing I would say is this. If you don't take charge of where you're going, then the environment will. Right? So here's the point. The point is, don't get comfortable. Don't get complacent. In today's world, always be on the outer edge of your comfort zone. Push your boundaries, and do it in a productive way so that you stay ahead of the game. The world's changing fast, and you need to keep up.
I could not have said that better myself. That
Well,
was excellent. Thank you
thank
so much. So, well, for those of you that are watching, thank you so much for spending your time with us. And next week, of course, we will have another great episode with another great entrepreneur. Until next time, just, like you said, keep moving forward, keep your head up, your shoulders back, take a nice deep breath, and have a great week. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you very much.